Hi, my name is Keith Cooper, Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to look at media settings for printing. Now, media settings is an aspect of printing that I get quite a lot of questions about, and I sense there's often a bit of confusion between the differences between settings and profiles. Now, settings versus profiles. Profiles, ICC profiles, they are files, data files, which are made specific for a particular paper on a particular printer, and they are about getting the best results out of that particular paper on that particular printer. They're not about making every print look the same, or any notion of perfection or anything like that, or correct, whatever that might mean. They are about getting better quality results. So I always reckon that you should use profiles when you're printing. Look at any of my printer reviews or any of the videos where I'm printing, and you'll see I'm using profiles. Now, I've covered making the profiles as well, but there's an aspect of this that before you make the profile, you need to know what media setting you're going to use. Media settings, that's the thing when you look on a printer, and this is the Epson ET18100 I'm looking at. It has a range of papers available, usually in some form of drop-down list on a menu somewhere when you're printing. And it will say in this instance, and I'm going partially from memory here, a list which will include Epson Ultra Glossy, Epson Premium Glossy, Epson Semi Gloss. I don't know what other ones there are. There's Epson Matte as well. There's a relatively limited range on here. And the question people ask is, well, I'm not using Epson Semi Gloss paper. What media settings should I use? Now, if you get a profile, then the profile, if you're using Epson papers, obviously, the Epson papers should match this. But let's say you're using Epson Premium Luster, and this is a print on Epson Premium Luster. Premium Luster isn't in the list. It's a paper that's been around, supported by loads of different printers, but if you look in the list of media settings on this printer, you'll find there is no Premium Luster. What do I use? Well, Luster is fairly similar to semi-gloss. So in profiling here and normal use, I will use Epson semi-gloss as a media setting. The media setting, what's it doing? It's what tells the printer how much ink to put down and a whole load of other parameters associated with the actual paper itself. Can include its thickness and all kinds of stuff. But the problem is, media settings are a bit of a mystery because unfortunately not one printer manufacturer, not any of them, give you any explanation as to what those media settings really mean. They don't tell you what they adjust, they don't tell you what the differences are between them. Now, if you're using just Epson media, then great. But as I've said, this is Epson Premium Luster and it's not a supported media. Now, some people think when they look at the list, they think, oh, well, the paper I want to use isn't there. Well, papers change names. There are only so many types of paper, and I'm fairly certain, in fact, I know from testing that if I use the Premium Semi-Gloss setting for this Epson Premium Luster, it works just fine. I used that printing using the Premium Semi-Gloss profile, and it printed okay. It looked all right. I mean, this particular print here was printed on Epson Premium Glossy paper, and it used the Premium Glossy media setting, and it looks just great. See, this is an original Epson paper with Epson written on the back of the paper. That works fine. This is an Epson paper as well. It works fine. What about third-party papers? Normally, when you get third-party papers, if they're decent quality, people will supply profiles for them. Now, for the better printers, your chances are you go to a big paper maker, a manufacturer and seller, and they will have a range of ICC profiles available, and those profiles will include the suggested media setting. So that's the media setting that was used right at the start when the profile was created. So if you've got profiles, the information with the profile should tell you which media setting to use. Let's say you've got something that's very similar. Well, you just have to go for as close as you can get. I don't honestly know what the difference is in the media settings between Epson Premium Glossy photo paper and Epson Ultra Premium Glossy photo paper. I honestly have no idea what the difference between those settings, what they actually mean, what it does. It's an area where the printer manufacturers fail in a big way across every printer they produce, right from smaller ones like this to bigger ones like the P5000 here. When I had some big Canon printers here, they had no information about it either. It's black box stuff they obviously don't want to tell you for some reason, and I've never been convinced why. But let's just say you're looking at using a paper which is not directly related to an Epson paper or a Canon paper. How would you decide, if you're doing your own profiling, for example, how would you decide on the media setting to use? Because remember, the profile is made at a media setting on a particular printer, and that's what specifies it. Indeed, when I produce profiles, the name of the profile that I give to the profile has the printer name in it, it has the paper name, but it also has a code for the media setting, so that I know that a particular profile I made, such as this one here for Premium Luster, the name of the profile would be 18100 EPL Epson Premium Luster and PSGPP Premium Semi-Gloss Photo Paper. So that would tell me all the settings I need to know. But if you're doing this yourself, how do you decide on the media setting? Well, there are lots of ways you can test it. You can go for something similar. Now, in this example here, I've tried to print on a watercolor paper on this printer here. Now, this printer is not made for printing on matte papers. It's for glossy color photo prints, which it does really well. But I've wanted to print on this relatively thin 210 gram paper. Thicker papers, by the way, will show roller marks on them. So you really need, this only really works for thin papers. I just picked, it was easy for me because there is only one matte paper, the Epson matte photo paper setting. I've used that. What about if I had 2 or 3 of them and I wasn't sure which one to use? Now, normally I base this on experience, knowing the printer, and I have a fairly good idea of what to use. But I do have a media test image, and this is the image. It's downloaded. I put the links to it. And I've been using this one for years. In fact, the article that I originally described the use of this on goes back many years. Media settings were much more important with older printers. Newer printers are much more linear, they are more predictable, they produce better results out of the box without profiling. Not right, they need profiling, but the results you get without profiles are much better. So this image here, and this is printed once again on the Epson Premium Luster. What should you look for if you're doing this in your image? Now, I've got some stuff in the article about it, but really you're looking for things like, has the ink dried? Because if the ink doesn't dry properly and you print this, I've printed it, you print it without color management as you would a profiling target. So I've printed it from the Mac ColorSync utility, printing as a color target. So that's with color management turned off or no color management. You can use the Adobe print utility, any means that you'd use for printing profiling targets, which, yeah, there's quite a lot of ways you can get around it, but I just use the Mac ColorSync utility. It's just very easy to use. I've printed that with no color management. So this, there is no profile of being applied. So what I've got is, has the ink dried? Well, the ink is dried. Is there any bleeding of the strong ink areas? And here's something where you really do have to look carefully, let the print dry properly. There was a very slight amount of bleeding on this paper here, enough that I was happy with it. It's a watercolor paper, so there's going to be a slight softness anyway. But it's obvious that this printer is not intended for matte papers like this. I was able with a profile to get good results on this, but it took a bit of doing. There's a big pile of waste paper of assorted matte art papers that just didn't cut it with this printer. But anyway, I'm looking for no blocking in this as well. So I'm looking, ideally, I don't expect it to be perfect, but I'm expecting to see the little square or little rectangles of the target here. I'm not expecting perfect gradations because there's no colour management been applied here, but I'm expecting not to see solid blocks. I'm not expecting to see steps of colour. So one corner is perhaps much stronger than another. So it's about, have a look at the article. It's got some more information about this. I'll put a link to it in the notes. But this is what I would print on an unknown paper. So if I really don't know what to do with a paper, I can always print this and it will tell me whether I've got any hope of profiling. If the ink, for example, doesn't dry properly on this, it tells me that no profiling in the world will actually help. Profiling is not a magic spell to make papers work. It can only work if the papers are capable of working in the printer. Now with this particular one and this one, just about, it was. But this is a media test image, slightly different from Profiling Target, which is that. And here's one of the ones I tried on a matte paper. And this particular one was a 310 gram paper. Now this one doesn't show any marks on it, but I wouldn't generally say use these papers. That's a Profiling Target. That's a media test target. So just to sum up, media profiles are what the printer uses to know which settings to apply. The media settings are used with a profile. Ideally, when you get the profile, it should tell you the recommended settings to use if they're not in the driver, because they may not be there, so particularly with third-party papers. So that's all you really need to know. And if you need to make your own profiles for some reason and you're not sure which media settings to use, or if you're getting profiles made for you and you're sending the targets off, because some companies you can buy paper off them, they'll send you a target like this to print out and return to them. Now normally they'll tell you what media settings to use, but if you want to experiment and you're not quite sure, you can always print this image off a few times on different media settings. You don't have to print it at a full page like this. You can print it smaller, and I've just printed this just for clarity and ease of showing what's going on here. So there you go. That is media settings versus profiles. Media settings are one of the vital things you need to set to get good prints. I wish Epson and Canon would give more information about what their media settings actually mean, but they don't. But anyway, I hope this is of use. Please feel free to ask questions. It's people's questions about stuff like this that always give me the ideas for the new videos and things. And please do subscribe to the channel. It's appreciated. And thanks for watching.